Hi, my name is Bernardo Morales. This is a podcast for Kinesiology 2510. This is a group project, but I'm doing it by myself. It's all good, no problem with that. And we're going to be discussing a very important topic for the next 10 minutes, which is racial inequality in sports. So let's start by defining what racial inequality is. And racial inequality can be described as when institutions such as schools fail to provide equal opportunities to individuals of all races, regardless of their physical traits such as skin color. Historically and particularly at educational institutions, attaining equality for ethnic minorities has not been easy. Racial equity, on the other side, is a process of eliminating racial disparities and improving outcomes for everyone. Over time, this will allow for open and peer relations in the sports world. Common examples of racial inequality include the lack of black owners in major sports leagues, the black quarterback way of thinking, and the scarcity of black head coaches. So, what makes some sports white and some sports black? The common stereotype that black boys and men perform better in sports requires people to think that black males are more strong and fast, and therefore they're better for the physical performance of sport. And the stereotype of white males is that they're better for whatever is behind the physical area of sports, so like not performance but like more thinking, administrative way of thinking. They are better decision makers, and they are better to be leaders. So they are better managers, and in general they are just white males are just regarded as better managers, as more suitable for those kinds of roles. Sports programs may also be scarce in low-income areas, so minorities have less exposure to certain sports. Even if children are exposed to new sports that they find they have talent in, they will never fully develop if they are not seen or given the opportunity. Some facts of the issue. Example, in the early 1900s, black athletes were barred from participating in organized sports nationally and internationally, for example, the Olympics. This then forced African Americans to create their own football, basketball, baseball, cricket, rugby teams and leagues, such as in the US, for example, the National Negro and Baseball League. Another example, ESPN reported that documented acts of racism and intentional acts of racial inequality in sports in the US decreased from 52 acts in 2019 to just 25 acts. However, internationally, there were 131 acts compared to 137 in 2019. If men's and women's track and field, men's and women's basketball, and football did not exist, the total number of black athletes plummets from 1,628 to 512. Also, NFL has only 2 minority owners of color in the entire NFL. Sahad Khan, a Pakistani American who owned part of the Jacksonville Tigers, and Kim Pegula, Asian American co-owner of the Bills. So this is a problem because it presents many ethical issues. Every time there is racial disparities, there is an ethical issue, because not everyone is being treated the same, and not everyone is given the same opportunities. People say that everyone is equal, this is the land of the free, everyone has the same opportunities, but in reality, there is a scarcity of black males that are being chosen for the top positions, for top administrative positions, head coaches, as we said before, and also management positions that are top tier. So let's discuss about legal rules and implications in sports. There are multiple legal rules that are in place in order to keep racism and racial inequality out of sports. Not only these are rules in the US but also internationally. Example, in 2014, the Clippers owner Donald Sterling was recorded saying racially insensitive comments over the phone to his ex-girlfriend. Head coach Doc Rivers, followed by many players, threatened to boycott their games if the NBA didn't implement repercussions against Sterling. And this is the reason why the NBA and the Sterlings reached an agreement that allowed Donald Sterling and the family to sell the team to Steve Ballmer. Sterling is banned from the NBA for life and fined $2.5 million by the league after the private recordings of him making racist comments were public. Another example, in European soccer, only under UEFA, DR Article 14 states that any person who insults the human dignity of a person or group of persons or whatever grounds, including skin color, race, religion, or ethnic origin, incurs a suspension lasting at least 10 matches or a specified period of time. If any other appropriate sanction, or any appropriate sanction. And that was quoted. This rule was put in place to defend minorities against racial inequality. It disallows any form of racism and discusses the consequences. Another example, Rooney Rule in the NFL. Rooney Rule was established in 2003. The rule requires teams to interview minority candidates for head coaching and senior football operation jobs. And the NFL handbook also states, quotes, clubs must interview at least one minority candidate from the Career Development Advisory Panel list or a diverse candidate not currently employed by the club. Clubs also must continue best practice recommendation for considering multiple diverse candidates, close quotes. The Rooney Rule is essentially an example of affirmative action, even with no hiring quota to meet. So, pros and cons. There's no pros, obviously, because racial inequality only brings problems. But there's an example of a con, which is Colin Kaepernick. He represents both pros and cons that can be associated with racial injustice and how it's perceived in America and with a private organization. Despite his morally led protest, he was still pushed out of the league for going against the product. The message he sent was very relevant, but there was still sacrifice involved in getting out. Another example, Stephen A. Smith has a platform and uses it to advocate for the lack of black head coaches in the NBA and the treatment of those who have a team. So these are just a couple of examples, a couple of people that are standing up for racism, but there are many cons, there are many consequences from racial disparities in sports. So how could we solve the issue in the future? I believe it could be hard to end with this racial inequality issue, especially because the problem is in everybody's head. The problem is with everyone's mentality, and it's hard to switch the way people think at an individual level or at a collective level, because people already have that mentality. People are already used to that mentality. And most of the time, when people are racist, they don't even know about it. It's unconscious. So I would say the first step to be able to end with racism is to understand racism, to provide education for sports teams and coaches to be able to understand what racism is in all the ways that there is, and in all the ways that it has existed and that it does exist right now in the US. I have personally taken a class of sociology that has helped me understand a lot of racism that I didn't know about, and it is really important for people to understand that there is many ways that we can end this, but first we gotta understand like how it all exists, how there's preference, how people always have preference, stereotypes, and there's also um, laws and the criminal justice system that have not been in favor of racial equality. Well, I guess the most important things, as always, promote respect and equality in sports and develop virtue in players. It would also be really important to enforce virtue and ethics in players so that they are able to reflect and build a better world little by little.